Before the war, life moved slowly, not perfectly, not richly, but peacefully. In a small European town, tucked between narrow streets and quiet fields, there lived a family that believed tomorrow would always look like today. A father who worked with his hands, a mother who carried warmth in her voice, children who measured time by meals and sunsets, not by fear. Mornings began with routine, the scrape of a chair, the smell of bread, a radio humming softly in the background. The father would straighten his coat before leaving, always pausing at the door. "I'll be back before dark," he said every morning, and he always was. The mother ruled the home not with authority, but with calm. She remembered birthdays. She remembered favorite foods. She remembered how to make ordinary days feel important. The children believed the world was permanent, that walls would never fall, that families stayed whole, that voices calling from another room meant safety. Evenings were simple. Dinner together, quiet laughter, stories repeated so often they became tradition. Outside, the world was already changing. But inside this home, war did not exist. Not yet. No one spoke of borders. No one spoke of armies. No one imagined that this table, these chairs, these moments, were already living on borrowed time. The father listened to the radio sometimes, longer than usual. His silence would stretch. His eyes would narrow. The mother noticed, but said nothing. Parents always know before children do. The children sensed only small changes. Voices lowered when news came on. Conversations stopped when they entered the room. Hugs lasted slightly longer. Still, bedtime came with certainty. The house slept peacefully. The future felt promised. This was the last season of innocence, the final chapter of a life untouched by war, because somewhere far away, decisions were being made. Decisions that would reach this home not with words, but with separation. The radio became louder, not in sound, but in importance. It now stayed on longer than before, filling the room with voices that spoke of places the children had never seen and decisions they could not understand. Words like mobilization, borders, troops floated through the air. The children played on the floor, pretending not to listen. But fear does not need understanding. It only needs presence. The father stopped whistling while getting ready for work. His movements became sharp, rushed. He still kissed the children's heads, still smiled, but the smile no longer reached his eyes. Outside, the town was changing. Shops closed earlier. Men gathered in quiet groups. Posters appeared on walls overnight. Bold letters, sharp commands. The mother noticed how neighbors greeted each other now. Quick nods, no laughter. Eyes scanning streets before speaking. At night, conversations happened in whispers. The children lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to words break apart behind closed doors. "Do you think it will reach us?" "I don't know." "We should prepare." "Prepare for what?" No one explained. The youngest child asked one evening, "Why is everyone sad?" The mother paused. "Because sometimes grown-ups worry about things that haven't happened yet." But even as she said it, her hands trembled. One morning, the father did not return before dark. The children waited at the window, counting footsteps. When he finally came home, his coat was dusty, his face pale. He said nothing during dinner. Later that night, the mother cried silently, her back turned. The father sat at the table long after the house slept, staring at nothing. The world was closing in, not with bombs, not with fire, but with uncertainty. The town siren was tested for the first time, a long, hollow sound that cut through the air. People froze. Some covered their ears. Some ran outside. The children thought it was a game. The parents knew better. That sound was not meant to protect. It was meant to warn. From that day on, nothing felt normal again. Every goodbye felt heavier. Every night felt longer. Every silence felt dangerous. War had not arrived yet, but it had entered their minds. And once it does that, it never truly leaves. The siren screamed, not tested this time, not practiced. This time it meant now. The sound ripped through the town like a blade, sharp and endless. People froze for half a second, just long enough to realize the truth. Then chaos exploded. Doors slammed open. Feet pounded against stone streets. Mothers grabbed children without shoes, without coats. The children did not cry at first. They were confused. Why was everyone running? The father shouted for them to move. His voice was louder than they had ever heard it. The mother pulled the youngest into her arms so tightly the child could hardly breathe. Outside, the sky looked wrong, too still, too wide. Then came the distant thunder. Not rain, bombs. The ground shook, lightly at first, like a warning. Windows rattled. Birds burst from rooftops. People rushed toward basements, cellars, anywhere underground. The family squeezed into a dark shelter beneath a neighbor's house. Too many bodies, too little air. Someone was praying. Someone else was screaming. The children pressed their hands over their ears as the explosions grew closer. Each blast felt like the world was cracking open. Dust fell from the ceiling. A light went out. The youngest finally cried. The mother rocked back and forth, whispering the same sentence again and again. "It will pass. It will pass." But she didn't believe it. A deafening explosion landed nearby. The entire shelter lurched. People were thrown to the ground. A woman sobbed uncontrollably. A man shouted names that received no answer. The father covered the children with his body. In that moment, he stopped being just a man. He became a shield. Time lost meaning. Minutes felt like hours. Each second stretched painfully long. When the siren finally stopped, no one moved. Silence felt more terrifying than noise. Slowly, people climbed out. The town they returned to was not the one they left. Smoke curled from broken buildings. Streets were buried under glass and stone. A house down the road was simply gone. The children stared. They did not speak. The oldest child noticed something small but permanent. The world no longer felt safe. That night, they did not sleep in beds. They stayed dressed. Lights off. Bags packed. The radio announced words that would echo for years. War has begun. The father listened in silence. Then he turned it off. Outside, soldiers marched through the streets, boots in perfect rhythm, faces unreadable. The children watched from a crack in the curtain. The mother pulled them back. "Don't look." But it was too late. The image burned into their minds. Uniforms, weapons, power. The next morning, school was canceled. Shops were shut. Posters replaced laughter. Life was no longer about future dreams. It was about survival. That was the day childhood ended. Not with a goodbye, not with understanding, but with fear. And fear would become their constant companion from now on. The knock on the door came early. Too early. Not loud. Not angry. Just 3 firm taps. The father knew. Before opening the door, before seeing the uniform, his heart already understood. The mother stood behind him, holding the youngest child. The paper was handed over without emotion. No explanation needed. A single word at the top said everything. Conscription. The father read it slowly. His name. His address. A date. Tomorrow. The mother's hands began to shake. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. The children watched silently. They didn't fully understand the paper, but they understood the silence. That night, the house felt smaller. The father packed quietly. Not many things. A change of clothes. A photograph of his family. A small notebook. The oldest child sat nearby, pretending not to watch. Finally, the father knelt down. "I need you to be brave," he said. The child nodded, even though fear filled their chest. The mother tried to be strong. She spoke of hope, of return, of when this is over. But her eyes told another story. At dawn, the street was full of men, some young, some old, all pretending not to be afraid. Wives clutched coats. Children clung to legs. The father hugged each child slowly, carefully, as if memorizing them. When he reached the mother, words failed. They held each other longer than necessary, too long. As he walked away, he did not turn back. He knew if he did, he might not leave at all. The children watched until he disappeared. That was the moment the family broke. Not loudly, not suddenly, but like a crack spreading through glass. Life after that became harder. Food grew scarce. The mother learned to stretch meals, to trade, to wait in long lines for bread that might never come. Nights were filled with whispers. Will he write? Is he alive? Letters arrived slowly, sometimes weeks apart, sometimes not at all. Each knock on the door brought terror. The children changed. They stopped asking when he would return. They stopped playing. The oldest took responsibility beyond their years. The mother aged quickly. Her hair began to turn gray. One winter night, an air raid hit nearby. The mother shielded the children alone this time. There was no father to cover them. After the bombing, the youngest asked a question no child should ask. Why did they take him? The mother had no answer, only tears. The town became filled with women, children, and silence. Men were ghosts, photographs, memories, names whispered at night. The radio spoke of victories and losses, but inside the house, the only battle was waiting. Waiting for news, waiting for return, waiting for survival. War had not just taken the father, it had stolen certainty. And the family learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes love is not enough to keep people together. Winter arrived without mercy. Cold didn't knock, it invaded. The house no longer smelled of food, only damp walls and smoke. The mother stood in ration lines before sunrise, holding small cards that decided life or hunger. Bread was thinner each week. Soup was mostly water. She learned to lie, not to soldiers, but to her children. "I already ate," she would say, pushing her portion toward them. At night, her stomach burned with pain, but she stayed silent. The children noticed. They always noticed. The oldest child began searching the streets. Broken crates, discarded coal pieces, anything that could be traded. Once, the child found a piece of chocolate on the ground, dirty, half melted. They wiped it clean and brought it home like treasure. The mother cried, not from happiness, but shame. This was not how children were supposed to grow. Air raid sirens became routine. Run, hide, wait. The mother timed explosions by instinct. She counted heartbeats between blasts. Every time the ceiling shook, she covered the children with her own body. If death came, it would take her first. Neighbors disappeared, some taken, some fled, some buried without names. Rumors filled the streets. If you trade with them, you survive. If you hide, you live. If you speak, you die. One evening, a stranger knocked. Not a soldier. A man with tired eyes. He offered food in exchange for sewing. The mother hesitated. Pride screamed no. Hunger screamed louder. She accepted. That night, she stitched uniforms for a war she hated. Each stitch felt like betrayal. But each stitch meant her children would eat. The oldest child asked quietly, "Is Papa doing this too?" The mother froze, then answered, "He's doing worse, so we can live." Letters stopped coming. Weeks passed. Months. Silence became heavy. At night, the mother whispered prayers she no longer believed in. She imagined her husband somewhere cold, hungry, afraid, just like them. One day, Bombing destroyed the market. No more lines, no more cards, only rubble. People fought over scraps. The mother traded her wedding ring for potatoes. The metal felt heavier than gold when she handed it over. That night, they ate properly for the first time in weeks. No one spoke, because everyone understood what had been lost. The youngest fell sick, no medicine, only cold cloths and whispered promises. The mother didn't sleep for 3 nights. She held the child and begged the war to take her instead. Outside, the world burned. Inside, a woman fought a battle no history book would ever record. She didn't carry a gun. She carried responsibility, and every day she survived felt like defiance. War wanted to break families. She refused, even if it meant breaking herself. War does not ask permission. It does not wait for children to grow. It forces them. By 1942, the streets had become the oldest child's classroom. No books, no teachers, only rules learned the hard way. Rule 1. Trust no one completely. Rule 2. Silence keeps you alive. Rule 3. Food is power. The child no longer cried during air raids, no longer flinched at gunshots. Fear had turned into calculation. Where to hide, which alley to avoid, who watched too closely. The black market was no longer a rumor. It was survival itself. In bombed-out buildings and abandoned basements, people traded. Bread for shoes, coal for blankets, information for safety. The child learned to read faces. Desperate eyes meant danger. Calm eyes meant experience. Smiling eyes meant traps. One afternoon, the child carried a sack of potatoes, heavier than their own body. A soldier stopped them, not shouting, not angry, just curious. "Where did you get those?" he asked. The child answered without hesitation. "My uncle." There was no uncle, but lies were now tools, like shoes or knives, necessary, not evil. The soldier stared for a long moment, then waved them on. That night, the family ate. The mother watched her child carefully. Something was missing from their face. Softness. She wanted to stop it, to protect what little innocence remained. But she knew the truth. The war had already taken it. Winter returned, colder, crueler. The youngest child grew thin. The mother's hands shook when she held them. The oldest made harder choices. Trading with men they shouldn't. Entering areas they were warned about. Once they saw a body in the street. No shoes. The child understood immediately. Shoes were worth dying for. They turned away and kept walking. At home, the mother asked, "Did anything happen today?" The child answered, "No." That word became heavier every day. A neighbor was arrested for hiding food. Another vanished after speaking too loudly. People stopped asking names. Only questions that mattered were, "Do you have something to trade? Do you know a safe place? Can you keep a secret?" The child learned how adults break, how hunger makes morals flexible, how fear silences kindness, how survival changes what feels right. One night, during bombing, the youngest child screamed. The ceiling cracked. Dust filled the room. The oldest didn't panic. They grabbed the siblings, covered their heads, and counted seconds between explosions, just like soldiers did. Afterward, the mother looked at her child with quiet horror. She whispered, "When did you learn that?" The child didn't answer, because they didn't remember a time before knowing it. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Not from the father, from the army. Official, cold, no details, no body, only words like missing and presumed. The mother collapsed. The oldest held her. For the first time, roles reversed. A child holding a parent. That night, the child stood at the window. War always finds a way to separate what it cannot destroy. The morning began quietly. Too quietly. No bombs, no sirens, only boots. Heavy boots. They echoed through the street like a warning no one wanted to hear. The mother froze. She already knew. A knock came, sharp, official, final. Not asking, not waiting. The door opened. 2 soldiers. 1 clipboard. 1 order. Evacuation, immediate. No explanations. No arguments. Families were being moved. For their safety, they said. Everyone knew what that meant. Outside, the street was filled with people carrying everything they owned in their arms. Old men with canes. Women clutching blankets. Children holding nothing but fear. The family joined the crowd. The youngest child cried silently, pressing their face into the mother's coat. The oldest scanned everything. Exits. Guards. Distances. Survival mode again. At the train station, chaos ruled. Names were shouted. Papers checked. Lines formed and broke. Then came the words that shattered everything. Men to the left. Women and children to the right. The mother grabbed the oldest child's hand. Hard. Too hard. As if grip alone could defeat war. But the soldiers stepped in. No exceptions. The mother tried to speak. Her voice broke before words came out. The youngest child was pulled from her arms, screaming. The sound cut deeper than any bomb. The oldest stood frozen, mind racing, heart collapsing. This was the moment they had feared without ever imagining. The family was being torn apart. The mother knelt, holding both children's faces. Her hands shook violently. "Listen to me," she whispered. "No matter what happens, stay together." Tears soaked her words. "I love you." Then she was pushed away, gone, just like that. The children were forced into a different line, surrounded by strangers. The youngest sobbed uncontrollably. The oldest wrapped an arm around them, whispering lies they wished were true. "She'll find us." She always does. But deep down, they weren't sure anymore. The train doors slammed shut. Darkness inside. No seats, no air, only bodies pressed together, and fear thick enough to taste. The train moved. Nobody knew where. Hours passed. A child fainted. An old woman prayed. Someone screamed in the dark. The oldest counted breaths again. Anything to stay sane. When the doors finally opened, they were no longer home. They were somewhere unfamiliar. Cold, gray, guarded. A camp, not a death camp. Not yet, but close enough. Names were taken, numbers assigned. People stopped being people. The children were separated again. Boys one way, younger children another. The youngest screamed the oldest's name. The oldest fought, kicked, yelled. A guard struck them across the face. Hard. Blood filled their mouth. The guard didn't even look angry. Just tired. Just routine. The last thing the oldest saw was the youngest being carried away. Arms reaching back. Eyes wide with terror. That image burned into memory. Forever. That night, the oldest lay on a wooden bunk surrounded by strangers. Alone for the first time. No mother. No siblings. No home. Only the echo of screams and the sound of trains leaving. They didn't cry. They couldn't. Something inside had gone numb. War hadn't just taken their family. It had redefined who they were. From that moment on, survival was no longer about food or hiding. It was about enduring separation, about staying alive long enough to hope. And somewhere, in another place, another line, another train, the mother was asking the same question. Are my children still alive? The camp did not greet newcomers with violence. It greeted them with rules. Rules written nowhere, yet enforced everywhere. Wake before dawn. Stand straight. Speak only when spoken to. Never ask questions. The oldest learned the first truth of camp life within hours. Survival depended on invisibility. The bunks were wooden slabs stacked 3 high. No mattresses. No blankets worth the name. Bodies shared heat like animals in winter. At night, coughing echoed endlessly, not loud enough to draw guards, not quiet enough to ignore. Hunger arrived before morning, not sharp hunger, slow, hollow hunger that made thinking difficult. Breakfast was a thin liquid called soup. It tasted like metal and water. Some drank it fast, others saved it, pretending control mattered. The oldest drank every drop. Control was an illusion. Each day followed the same rhythm. Roll call, work, roll call again. Work meant carrying stones, digging trenches, sorting scrap. Meaningless labor designed to exhaust, not produce. People collapsed. If they didn't get up fast enough, they were dragged away. Nobody asked where they went. The oldest learned the second truth. Questions were dangerous. Weeks passed. Faces changed. Cheeks hollowed. Eyes sank deeper. Voices grew quieter. Names disappeared. People became the man on bunk 4, or the woman with the limp. One night, a guard dropped a loaf of bread by accident. The room froze. Nobody moved. Everyone wanted it. Everyone feared it. The oldest waited. Seconds passed. Then someone lunged. A fight exploded. Desperate, silent, brutal. The guard returned. 3 people were beaten. The bread was crushed under a boot. The lesson was clear. Hope could get you punished. But hope never fully dies. It hides. It adapts. In the corner bunk slept an older man. Thin, calm, observant. He spoke softly, only at night. "Don't rush," he whispered once. "Watch first." He taught the oldest how to survive, how to stand so guards ignored you, how to walk without drawing attention, how to trade favors without speaking. A button for an extra sip of soup, a quiet warning for a safer work group, a shared crumb for information. This was survival without weapons. Intelligence replaced strength. Patience replaced courage. The oldest learned to listen more than speak, to read moods, to disappear in crowds. Sometimes kindness appeared where none should exist. A woman slipped a piece of cloth to bandage a wound. An old man shared half his soup, whispering, "For later." These moments felt dangerous, almost painful, because they reminded everyone of who they used to be. At night, dreams were worse than hunger. Dreams of home, dreams of the mother's voice, dreams of the youngest sibling calling out. Waking up was torture, because waking meant remembering the truth. The oldest repeated one thought every morning: stay alive, not for revenge, not for justice, for reunion. Rumors spread through the camp like disease. The war was turning. Cities were falling. Liberation was coming. Nobody knew what to believe. The guards grew more nervous, more violent. Fear had shifted sides. One evening, during roll call, someone collapsed, a young boy. No older than the youngest sibling would have been. The guard shouted. Nobody moved. The oldest stepped forward, instinct over reason, and lifted the boy. A risk, a terrible risk. The guard stared, long, then looked away. The boy lived. That night, the older man whispered, "You're learning." Learning what? How to survive? No, how to remain human without being destroyed by it. Winter returned again. Cold seeped into bones. People disappeared faster, but the oldest endured. Quiet, unnoticed, alive, and somewhere beyond the wire, beyond the guards, beyond the hunger, the war was moving closer to its end. But for those inside the camp, every day felt endless. Change did not arrive like a celebration. It arrived as confusion. One morning, the guards were fewer. The shouting was less organized. Orders contradicted each other. The routine, so rigid for so long, began to crack. People noticed immediately. In camps, people notice everything. Whispers spread quietly from bunk to bunk. "The front is close. They're retreating. I heard artillery last night." Hope returned, but cautiously. Hope had hurt people before. That afternoon, sirens wailed. Not air raid sirens, but alarms inside the camp. Guards ran, not marched, not controlled. Ran. That was the first real sign. The oldest felt it in their chest before understanding it in their mind. Power was shifting. Some prisoners cheered too early. They were silenced by others. Not yet, someone whispered. Wait. The night passed without roll call. That had never happened. No one slept. At dawn, smoke rose beyond the fence. Not from chimneys, but from the road. Engines, voices shouting in a different language. The gates rattled, then opened. No speech, no announcement, just the absence of control. People stepped forward slowly, like animals unsure if the trap was real. Some cried. Some laughed uncontrollably. Some collapsed where they stood. The oldest didn't move. Not yet. Freedom, after years of captivity, felt dangerous. Outside the camp, soldiers moved quickly, focused, tense. They looked shocked by what they saw. Thin bodies, hollow eyes, silence where celebration should have been. A soldier offered food. The oldest hesitated. Another lesson from survival. Too much, too fast, can kill you. They took a small piece, a bite. It tasted unreal, warm, real. Nearby, someone ran toward the road screaming a name. Another dropped to their knees, praying. The camp dissolved into movement. Chaotic, emotional, overwhelming. But freedom didn't mean answers. Freedom meant questions. Where do we go? Who is alive? Is home still there? The oldest asked one question only. Where are the children? No one knew. Records were gone. Names scattered. People moved across borders like ghosts. Weeks followed in camps for the freed. Not prisons, but places of waiting. Waiting for lists. Waiting for names. Waiting for someone to appear. The oldest searched every face, every transport, every rumor. One day, a worker called out a name, their family name. The oldest stood so fast the room spun. Hands shook. A pause. Then another child stepped forward. Not the youngest, a cousin, a distant relative. Alive, but alone. From them came fragments. The mother had been moved east. The youngest. Last seen months ago. No certainty, no closure. Freedom did not bring relief. It brought grief with space to breathe. The oldest wandered ruined streets afterward. Cities shattered. Homes empty. People rebuilt walls with shaking hands. Children played among rubble. Life resumed but broken. At night, the oldest dreamed again. Not of the camp, of the moment at the station. The grip of the mother's hand. The promise that still echoed. Stay together. They had tried. They had survived. But war does not always allow reunions. Still, the oldest kept looking, because survival had taught one final lesson. As long as you are alive, the story is not over. And somewhere, across borders, across years, answers waited. The war was over. The bombs had stopped. The guns fell silent. The streets, once alive with fear, now whispered slowly with cautious life. The oldest child walked through the ruins of what had once been a town filled with laughter, homes, and families. Everything was gone. Buildings crumbled like memories. Smoke still rose from distant fires. The air smelled of dust, burnt wood, and grief. Yet, amidst this destruction, life whispered again. The oldest thought of the family, the mother, the youngest sibling, the father. Where were they now? Hope had been a fragile thing for so long. Small moments in darkness, a stolen piece of bread, a warm hand under the cold, trembling sky. The streets were filled with people like shadows. Some walked slowly, unsure, broken. Some laughed quietly at the first glimpse of normality. In the rubble of what had been the town square, The oldest spotted a figure, a woman, thin, worn, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes searching. The heart recognized what the mind still feared. "Mother!" The mother's eyes widened. Recognition, relief. Tears fell freely, unashamed. The child ran, faster than fear, faster than memory. Arms wrapped around her, holding her as if they could pull the years back together. The mother held on just as tightly. For the first time in years, they didn't speak. No words could capture what the silence now said. Later, they found the youngest sibling, alive, thin, scared, but alive. Reunion was not perfect. The father was gone, lost to the war. Memories of him lingered in every corner. Yet together they became a new family. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The town slowly rebuilt itself. Children returned to schools. People planted gardens among ruins. Hope grew in small, stubborn patches. The oldest reflected on the journey. Every fear endured, every night of hunger, every moment of watching life slip away. It had carved strength, resilience, and courage. And it had taught one lesson above all. Even in the darkest times, survival is an act of love. Walking through the streets, sunlight broke through clouds. The shadows of the past lingered. But now light touched the ruins. The family held hands, together at last. Not whole, but surviving. Not victorious in the way wars declare, but victorious in the truest sense of humanity. They had endured. They had survived. And they had each other. The camera pans back. The ruined city stretches into the distance. Smoke rises from rebuilding homes. Birds fly above. A new day has begun. And in that silence between war and peace, the story of this family, shattered, broken yet alive, remains.